let's do some questions for Chapter 2 here. 2.3. Suppose you enter into a short futures contract to sell July silver for $17.20 per ounce. The size of the contract is 5,000 ounces. The initial margin is $4,000 and the maintenance margin is $3,000. What change in the futures price will lead to a margin call? What happens if you do not meet the margin call? So let's keep in mind our position. We're short. So any price higher than $17.20 will start to hurt us. We have a $4,000 initial margin. We would get a call at $3,000. So if we lose $1,000, then we're out of the game. So basically, we have a $1,000 margin of safety that we can live with before we get a margin call. And since the contract is for 5,000 ounces, that turns into 20 cents per contract. So we would get a call if the futures price gets to $17.40. Our margin would no longer be 4,000. We would have lost $1,000 in the mark to market because we have a futures, not a forwards, right? That would bring us down to 3,000 and would trigger a call. What happens if you do not meet the margin call? Well, they just shut your position. Who's they? Your broker most likely will shut it because your broker is responsible for monitoring these margin positions. He sees that you don't have it. He or she sees, or it sees that you don't have it. You'll get an automated email. Nothing personal about it at all. Just, hey, you got to cover it, and you got to do it that day. You got to do it that day, typically by closing, by 2:30. And if you don't meet it, well, then they just shut it down. Question 2.4. Suppose that in September 2012, a company takes a long position in a contract on May 2013 crude oil futures. It closes out its position in March of 2013. The futures price per barrel is $68.30 when it enters the contract, $70.50 when it closes out its position, and $69.10 at the end of December 2012. One contract is for delivery of 1,000 barrels. What is the company's total profit? When is it realized? How is it taxed if it is A, hedger, and B, a speculator? And assume that the company has a December 31st year end. For questions like this, it is often easiest to put it on a timeline so that we can see exactly what's going on. So it says in September of 2012, we entered into a long position at 68.30. And it was for the May 2013 crude oil futures contract. The underlying is 1,000 barrels of oil, so the ticker on that is CL. CL is for West Texas Intermediate for 1,000. If you want a smaller contract, by the way, you can get QM. QM is for 500 barrels. Anyways, May 13th is when is the contract month, and it was closed out on March 13th. March of 2013 for $70.50. But we're also given a December 31st closing for 2012, and we're told that that is $69.10. So there we go. There's our whole story on the timeline. And the question is, what is the company's total profit? And we can break this down into two components. We can break it down into this component and this component because we'll have to when we figure out how it's taxed, so we may as well do that now. $68.30 to $69.10 is an increase of 80 cents, and since it's for 1,000 barrels of oil, that'll be a profit of $800 by year end. $69.10 to $70.50 is an increase of $1.40, and since it's for 1,000 barrels, that'll be an increase of $1,400. So let's answer this question. What is the company's total profit? 800 plus 1,400. Total profit equals $2,200. That's easy enough, right? How is it taxed if it is a hedger? Well, okay, so if you're a hedger, when do you recognize this $2,200? You'll recognize it in March of 2013. If it is a speculator, when will you recognize it? Well, you'll recognize $800 in December in 2012. So for 2012, you'll recognize $800, and for 2013, you'll recognize $1,400. And that is, now it's important that you should understand this. How does the tax authority know that you are a hedger or a speculator. When you get a broker that allows you to trade futures, you must declare. You declare what you are at that time. So if you declare yourself as a speculator, then all your gains, no matter how long you hold this or how short you hold this, all your gains are short-term gains. There are no capital gains in futures. The reason is because daily settlement. So the longest a futures contract lasts is 1 day, because the very next day it's a brand new contract as far as the tax authorities are concerned, and as far as the clearinghouse is concerned, it pretty much is a new contract. So even though you're holding from September and you settle out in March, because of daily settlement, every day that you settle here is income or losses attributed to December 2012. Not until you hit the next year does it actually apply to that year. So that's fairly straightforward. But a hedger takes the last day position, or the profit and loss is attributed to that last day only. A trader buys 2 July futures contracts on orange juice. Each contract is for the delivery of 15,000 pounds. The current futures price is 160 cents per pound. The initial margin is $6,000 per contract, and the maintenance margin is $4,500 per contract. What price would lead to a margin call? Under what circumstances could $2,000 be withdrawn from the margin account? So let's look at the first one. We've entered into a long futures contract because we bought 2 July futures contract. Each is for delivery of 15,000, so we're long. So if the price dropped, we'd be in trouble. And since our initial margin is 6,000, we can drop up to $1,500 before we're in trouble. So let's put that in place, $1,500. And what's the underlying amount for? 15,000. 15,000. So if we do the math on this, we'll get 0.10 or 10 cents. So we would get a margin call at a futures price of 150 cents per pound. We don't have to worry about the 2 contracts here, by the way. We don't have to worry about the 2 contracts because it's asking us at what price we would get a call. That 150 cents applies to both. Even if we had 10 contracts, we only have to figure out what would trigger a call on one. Even though we have 2 contracts, sure, that means we have $12,000 in initial margin. We'd get a call at $9,000, but our underlying now is $30,000, so it's the same thing. The second part says, under what circumstances could $2,000 be withdrawn from the margin account? Here, we have to do a little bit of math. If we would want to withdraw $2,000, keep in mind we have 2 contracts, which means that each contract would have made $1,000. So we can make $1,000, and each contract has an underlying of $15,000. So that will give us 6.66 cents, 0.06 repeated. So the futures price, at a futures price of, well, we can't really leave it at 6.6 cents, so we'll bring it up to 7 cents. And since we're long, at a futures price of $1.67 per pound, we could withdraw the extra 2,000 because each contract would have supplied an extra $1,000 in profit. Question 215. At the end of 1 day, clearinghouse members long 100 contracts, and the settlement price is $50,000 per contract. The original margin is $2,000 per contract. On the following day, the member becomes responsible for clearing an additional 20 long contracts, entered into a price of $51,000 per contract. The settlement price at the end of this day is $50,200. How much does the member have to add to its margin account with the exchange clearinghouse? So we started with 100 contracts, and the initial margin is $2,000 per contract. So that means we would have to have $200,000 of margin going out of that day into the next day. The next day we added 20 contracts, so there will be a margin of $2,000 for each of those. So we will have to add 40,000. But we do have some benefits here. We have 100 contracts. We ended the day at 50,200. The first 100 we entered into at 50. So we're up $200 per contract times 100 contracts. So we're up $20,000. So if we're up 20, if we have to add another 40, we can take 20 off that total. We only have to actually add 20,000 because of that. However, these 20 have now caused us a problem, haven't they? They've lost 800 times that 20, so we have to add $16,000, so 36,000. So at the end of the day, when we close at 50,200, we need to have the 200,000 plus the 36. We need to have $236,000 in our account, in our margin account. We have 200, so there is the amount we need to top off with.